in all that we do, we seek. Monsignor Anthony will be late, but will be here this afternoon. He's held up at a session with the St. Lucy's Home, of which he's also chair of the board. So what we're going to
give thanks. Could we like everybody to stand, please? Right there. Yes, let us pray. We say glory to Word, glory to Son, to the cause of the living eye, Hilai, Selassie, Rastafari. I and I, mother and father who art in Zion. I and I bear thy name, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in Zion. Give us this day and our daily needs, and forgive our sins as we forgive those who sin against I and I. Lead us out of temptations and deliver us from all that is evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory, who liveth and reigneth forever and ever. Hilai, Selassie, Rastafari. O Thy Majesty, we do give thanks for this moment where we could come together to discuss I and I affairs. We do give thanks for all ones and ones who are present. Those who are on their way, we do pray that the eye would guide them in safely. We do pray that the eye would take control of our consultation and let the eye wise mind take hold of this reasoning. Guide and protect all of I and lead I and I in the way that we should go. For that we do give thanks for the I holy name, Hilai, Selassie, Rastafari. Blessed Lord, give thanks.
Give thanks. Sit. Please sit. And it is my honor and pleasure to welcome you to make the welcome and introductory statements. We want to apologize for some absences that were not planned, but will certainly not hold back on our continuation of what needs to be done, because who is not here physically is here in spirit. We want to apologize for the absence of Her Worship Madam Mayor, the Minister of Local Government, and the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Local Government, who are all on official mission abroad. Also, Madam Deputy Mayor Phyllis Duplessis, who was to have deputized for the mayor, had a sudden urgent call this afternoon just before the start that does not make it possible for her to be here, but the Mayor and Constituencies Council is adequately represented by Councillor Marius Modest and Councillor Timothy James, who have worked along with the CCC administration to ensure that we had this quick turnover from the activity for the disabled that was held here throughout the day, which ended after 3, and we want to commend the City Council employees who have worked beyond the call of duty to ensure that we can engage in our discussions within the spirit that we will be able to with this layout. That being said, we want to point out that the mayor, while she is abroad, certainly sent a message to us, and that message will be read on behalf of Her Worship the Mayor by Councillor Marius Modest. Councillor Modest.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, the City Council and its councillors, these days are moving with lightning speed. Like this afternoon, I was, for the next maybe 5 minutes, will be given, or has been given the task of a post that is not really there, being the food deputy. So on behalf of the mayor this afternoon, I will recite her words to you. From colonialism to independence, the Castries Town and City Council and the Town Hall and the City Hall have long been central to public discussions and debate in our island and nation's capital. This has been the place where citizens, town people have gathered to discuss public affairs and engage in other educational and uplifting cultural activities like engaging or staging of plays, competitions, musicals, and cultural events. This is where discussion took place about different stages in our constitutional development, from adult suffrage or the right to vote for the minority of St. Lucians in 1951 to statehood in 1967. And the designation of Castries as a city before St. Lucia became independent is where many discussions of different types of independence, political, constitutional, economical, and cultural were hosted by small political grouping called Workers' Revolutionary Movement in 1978. And here too is where issues of importance to the citizens of the four constituencies continue to be deliberated on to this day. Which is why we at the Constituency Council and Mayor are pleased to be associated with this exercise, launching a national consultation on the important issue of reparation for slavery and native genocide. When the NRC chairperson contacted us about this event in the 10th year of its existence, we felt it was a good opportunity to invite citizens of Castries to come here this evening to tell the government and CARICOM partners what the citizens want from reparation. This is an important democratic exercise, and we restored to the traditional means of sending a tongue crier around the four Castries constituencies to invite citizens to turn out tonight. Other constituencies and local authorities are invited to join us and the NRC in this national consultation exercise. And whilst unavoidably absent, I am here wholeheartedly in spirit and support as we look forward to hearing from the people. Reparation is being sought from Europe. On behalf of the Mayor and Constituency Council, I commend the NRC and its members for decades of volume of service for the cause of a better humanity for St. Lucia. Through collection and debts overdue to generations of St. Lucians of African descent, whose ancestors were implanted from the continent. I once again wholeheartedly endorse this national exercise and look forward to its continuation in 2024 in every constituency across the island towards better understanding of reparations and reparatory justice. I also close with full thanks and praise to Councillor Timothy James and all of our management and administrative team who helped to make this event a new reflection of the continuing engagement of the Mayor and Castries constituency and the City Hall in formulation of discourse on issues and matters of national importance. I wish you all the best in this evening's deliberation on reparation for St. Lucia from the UK, France, Europe for slavery and native genocide. I thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Modest. And we will now have a message from Councillor Timothy James.
Good evening. Reparations. This issue has for the longest while been piloted by the Rastafarian movement, even when it was not politically prudent to do so. And so therefore, at this point, I would like us to acknowledge the contributions and the voice for reparations that has resonated within our society for more than 25 years, being spearheaded by the Rastafarian movement. When it was not intellectually palatable to do so, the Rastafarian movement carried that torch all along the way. And so, today, it is prudent for intellectuals within the region to jump on this bandwagon. Nonetheless, we welcome the input, as unity is strength, and together we can attain what it is we so deserve insofar as reparations. Reparations, a move to redress violations of human rights and native genocide by providing a range of material and symbolic benefits to the victims, family, and in some cases, the community. It is sad tonight that there is not a bigger crowd or a larger amount of persons who take interest in what this means. President at the African Union and CARICOM Global Fund for Reparations, earlier on this month, President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, stated that the entire period of slavery meant our progress economically, culturally, and psychologically have been stifled, and that the effects of slavery and native genocide could never be quantified. This I acknowledge and accept. As for we in the Caribbean, colonialization, which is an ingredient, a fundamental ingredient of colonialization is native genocide, which fosters and creates the basis for colonialization to thrive. And so therefore, we as a people, in asserting our independence, our very value, human worth and value, it is not a choice as to whether or not we demand reparations. Our very identity dictates that we demand reparations. The Jews got it. The Armenians got it. Recently, a level of reparations was made to the Kenya Mau Mau survivors and family of the Mau Mau warriors of Kenya. And reparations is also a means of getting the aggressor, the perpetrator, to take responsibility. Without reparations, the British and the colonial powers which enslaved our ancestors and drained our community, our society of resources, have not acknowledged responsibility for such atrocities. Slavery, it wasn't accidental that slavery was an assault on our identity, economically, culturally, educational, and otherwise. In order for slavery to thrive, it was necessary to keep people ignorant. It was necessary to suppress culture. It was necessary to keep the physical development of people at the bottom. And therefore, as such, we attained independence, not having adequate schooling and education structure in place. We attained independence with an economy that was drained and no economic structure in place so as to guarantee our longevity. And so therefore, the call for reparations, again, is a statement with regards to our identity. In what form may reparations come? It is almost impossible to ask for reparations monetarily. But however, we could demand access to the markets, economic markets. We could demand access to the institutions of higher learning. We could demand that the British, the French, provide more governmental scholarships to our state. We could demand more of our products on the market shelf with less stringent quality controls or quality policies, because by and large we do not have the infrastructure in place to meet what the quality requirements are. People, brothers and sisters, you here tonight, we grew up hearing that, in fact, in a lot of households, our parents told us, just be happy and thank God for having meat the next day. And there's a difference between existing and living. Sadly, that mindset has forced a lot of us to exist, just being grateful that you saw the next day. Whereas the complement that comes with living, planning, organizing, putting things in place for tomorrow and the day after, our society is totally void of that. The few of us here today and online must deal with that mindset in order for us to attain what is it we want to. Reparations is not a choice. Reparations is inevitable insofar as shaping our identity. I cannot overemphasize that fact. We cannot allow those, and in some cases, Even the president of Ghana, when he said that it was a tragedy, it wasn't a tragedy. It was a barbaric act of savagery calculated by those who thought they were more, or they had the right, they were more human than us. And so therefore, just this very definition, we cannot allow Europe and the West to go on without taking responsibility and without demanding reparations. We, as the people, have to do it for our children. We have to create that identity that we were robbed of and say to Europe and the perpetrators of the slave trade that we're not commodity. And we can assert ourselves and our voices by demand. In doing so, we have to assert ourselves and our voices by demanding reparations in whatever shape or form. I thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Timothy James, and certainly his contribution is helping put us in the stage for our question and answer period, where we will be going into the nitty-gritty of what reparations is, what it is meant to be, but also to find out from you what you think it is and what you would like to see out of reparations. We now pass the mic and the presentation to our next speaker, Bongo Wisely Taparai, the president of the Caribbean Rastafari Organization, who is also a member of the National Reparations Committee of St. Lucia. Let's welcome Bongo Wisely Taparai.
Yes, greetings in the name of His Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie I and Empress Menen. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome each and everyone who are here this evening as part of that national consultation organized by the National Reparations Committee. Well, my name is Bongo Wisely Taparai, the president of the Caribbean Rastafari Organization, also a member of the Ayanola Council for the Advancement of Rastafari, and also an elder within the Nyabingi tradition in St. Lucia, or Ayanola. I give thanks for the opportunity, but normally in starting I would like to quote one of our illustrious African philosophers, Dr. F.P. Mensah, who said, "Until we rediscover who we are through self-realization, the quest for African liberation and changing the narrative will be a mere Pan-African celebration, public lectures, and mental illusion." We're definitely looking to counteract that. So in an effort to counteract that, self-realization is key. And that is how we would be able to get to know ourselves, to know where we came from, where we are, and where we're moving forward. Give thanks for that quotation. Talking about reparations, whenever people hear of reparations, first thing which comes to mind is money. Boy, how much money you think them people will give you? You think them people will give you all any money? That is always the issue, money. Money has its part within reparations, because the definition for reparation would be the process of repairing, healing, and restoring a people injured because of their group identity and the violation of their fundamental human rights by individuals, governments, corporations, religions, and other institutions. Reparations seek reconciliation between the victims and the beneficiaries, or the perpetrators of the crime, to use another term. It is non-confrontational and conciliatory, meaning reparation is not something where you're looking to fight and create antagonism. It is something where we expect to sit down around a table and discuss the issues of reparations. Because as we say, it is a reconciliatory process for both the victims and the beneficiaries or the perpetrators. Because even today, the beneficiaries or the perpetrators of that crime against humanity, they need healing as well. We as the victims, we need healing also. So both of us need healing so that we could have a peaceful world and live in love and harmony, love and unity. Reparations seeks to restore equality and justice before the law. Equality and justice is something which we all striving to see, that we have equality and justice in whatever we do, because we all were made equal in the eyes of the Almighty. None was higher than the other. But we know because of colonialism, some of us were considered inferior and others were considered superior. That is an injustice. And reparation is there to bring equality and justice to all. Within reparations, there are two phases, two aspects of reparations. What we would refer to as external reparations, which is the debt owed to our ancestors. Remember when our ancestors were stolen away from Africa and forced to work on the plantation from sunrise to sunset. They never got a cent in terms of salary or payment. Nothing like that was done. So in terms of the external reparation, there is a debt to be paid. So within reparation, there is the money aspect as well. But another aspect of reparation is what we refer to as internal reparations, which is the self-healing aspect. Self-healing or self-made repairs. It is a form of repair which we ourselves, as African descendants, can do among ourselves without the intervention of the perpetrators. As black people, with the psychological damage which we went through, the economic damage which we went through, the cultural damage which we suffered, the educational damage which we went through as a people. All of these, we among ourselves, if we put our heads together, we can overcome those differences in terms of self-healing. For example, Rastafari is one who I must say has been on the pathway of self-healing, because we know we were inherited a colonial system where the names given to us were colonial names, and normally your name is supposed to be identifying who you are. So they didn't want us to know where we came from, so they got rid of our African names. We all know this story of Mansa Musa in that thing, I forget the name of the movie, where they beat the youth man, just to say that his name is, they didn't want him to be saying that his name is Mansa Musa in roots. Give thanks. Yeah. Beat him to death, almost to death, to say that the name which he was given by his colonizer, that's the name he's supposed to say. But he knew his name originally was Mansa Musa. You know, so it's the same way within Rastafari. A lot of us have changed our name. In my instance, for example, I was born Bernard Seeley. Now, I didn't change the name wisely by myself, but my brethren, my family, Rastafari family, realized, nah man, no Rasta can't be Seeley. Because in reality, you know, as a schoolboy going to school, in primary school, my teacher used to ridicule me, you know, with that name Seeley. Stop being silly, and why are you acting like a silly boy? Silly boy, and you know, because S-E-A-L-Y, which is my name, but S-I-L-L-Y, which means stupid and foolish. They all pronounced the same. You know, so they were using that to kind of denigrate me. So my family considered, nah man, Rastafari can't be silly. So my name was changed to Wisely Tafari. And so I carry the name Bongo Wisely Tafari today. All of that is part of returning to my identity as an African descendant. Because the name Seeley was some colonial master who had big business. So my parents took on the name Seeley and then passed it on to us. You know, so in the process of healing myself, the name had to be changed. And it's so with a lot of the item need to go within the eye themselves, as it says, to get to know yourself through self-realization. Then you will realize that the name you've been given does not really identify who you really are. Even the names of different things, the way we do things, the way we organize ourselves as a people, the religion that we practice today is something that was enforced upon us. Our African spirituality was beaten out of us, and religion was forced upon us. You know, so in getting to know ourselves as part of our reparations, the internal reparations, we must make those changes moving forward. Within our ancestors, during the time of slavery, when slavery was coming to an end and the Emancipation Act was tabled in 1834, the cry from our ancestors at the time was, no reparation, no emancipation. And the reason that cry came about was because the Africans realized that with the so-called Emancipation Act, the slave master was paid, whereas our ancestors who worked from sunrise to sunset never received a cent. So hence they came up with the thing, no reparation, no emancipation, because the whole emancipation thing was like a compromise to benefit the slave masters and not necessarily the Africans. So even today when we celebrate emancipation, a lot of people still a bit confused as to what really emancipation is all about. People are even asking the question, what are we celebrating emancipation for? Because we have not yet received reparations. We are still hurt. We are still injured. You know, we are still in bondage mentally, psychologically, spiritually. You know, though we claim, yes, we are independent country. You know, but then in the whole process of healing ourselves, we have to go through that process of acknowledging who we are, where we came from, and where we heading. So all of that is part of the whole process of reparations. So as I say, it's not only the money side of it, but monies have a part to play, because as I say, our ancestors worked from sunrise to sunset and they were never paid. And if a man, a fair day's work to a fair day's pay, we always hear that saying. So why wasn't our ancestors given a fair day's pay? One of the reasons is because the colonializers considered them not to be human beings. So they don't deserve payment according to the colonizers. You know, so that is why the cry for reparations is still alive today. And it is our responsibility as descendants of the African people who are brutalized. We must keep that cry alive. Because there is a saying in Africa, we and our ancestors are one. We are our ancestors are us. So if the cry for reparations was active from 1834, and up to a day like today, we have not yet received it. The Right Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey took up the cry. His Back to Africa movement. Again, Marcus Garvey was ignored. He was even jailed in America for fraud and so on. He died almost lonely, you know, because they considered the ideas he was pushing, it was not in sync with the colonizers. So they just ignore him. And that is what is happening today with the reparations campaign. In 2013, the CARICOM governments decide to entertain reparations, embrace the idea of reparations. And they set up the CARICOM Reparations Commission. And the commission was then mandated in every territory to establish what we call the National Reparations Committee. 10 years today, we are celebrating our 10th anniversary today. And up to a day like today, none of the national reparation committees have been allocated budgetary, they've never given any budgetary allocations to carry on the works of the National Reparations Committee. So people must be wondering, how can that go anywhere? Because reparations entails education. Because remember, our education was beaten out and we were enforced with colonial education. So in terms of reparations, a lot of the students today, when you ask them about reparation, what is that all about? So long that happened, I thought you all had forget about that already. That is their response, because they are not aware of the history of reparations. They are not aware of their own history as African descendants. You know? So it's all these things the reparation campaign is there to address. Because the Reparations Committee in St. Lucia, it is our duty to educate the masses. Because reparation is not something for the government or for them bourgeois or big-time people. Reparation is for the grassroots people. These were the people who suffered on the plantation. So today, to get them interested, we must educate them. And the Reparations Committee need to be facilitated by the governments to be able to go into the schools, go into the communities, and so on, and educate the masses. It's then now the masses will be able to identify with the subject of reparations. You know, so these are the challenges, you know, which the Reparations Committee has been enduring over the years. But we as African descendants, it is within our DNA, we will never give up the fight. We will never get weary. Although our own colleagues try to ridicule us and tell us all manner of things to try and discourage us, but we remain confident in the victory of good over evil. And we know that slavery was an evilous act. Reparation is a righteous act. So we remain confident that the victory for reparations is assured. And it's by our confidence we are here today, continuing, and would like to see more, especially the younger generation, the students, because one of the issues again in our schools, history is not being taught as a subject. You know, so a lot of the students don't know their history, where they came from, you know. Now the reparations thing is not just only to say, well, just a Rasta thing or just some people who clamoring for that. In 2001, the United Nations organized the World Conference Against Racism that took place in Durban, South Africa, where all leaders of the world were present, most countries were present. And one of the outcomes, the findings of that conference was that transatlantic slave trade, chattel slavery, native genocide, and the continuing colonialism, these are crimes against humanity. And the fact that they are crimes against humanity, there is need for redress. Within that same conference, a plan of action came through. And in terms of the redress, it states that African countries need to provide the welcome return for us in the diaspora. And added to the welcome return, there must be facilitation of settlements. We need to be settled on the African continent. That is those of us who desire to return. Because it's not everybody who wants to repatriate. But those who have that mindset should never be denied, because it is their right to return to their ancestral homeland. So as a result of the need for that establishment of settlements in Africa, the Caribbean Rastafari Organization has come up with what we refer to as our flagship for reparations. And that is, we have established what is known as the RSAP project, RSAP, Reparation for Settlement in Africa project. For those of you who may need more information about that, we've established a website, www.reparationforsettlement.net, where if you go there, you will get more information as to the whole initiative and how we can interact. Because what we are trying to get is get information from people who are interested in reparations, what area they would like to go to, what resources they are bringing. Because in the diaspora, we've gone to school, we've gone to universities, some of us have become successful business entrepreneurs, and so on. So those businesses need to be transferred over to the continent. So the RSAP project, what it is looking to do is to utilize the proceeds from reparations to help establish those settlements in the African countries that are willing to receive us as returning citizens. Because we've seen a number of people get a ticket, buy a ticket, and they go Africa and says repatriation. When they reach Africa, they are treated as visitors, as foreigners. That's not repatriation. Because for repatriation, there must be the welcome return. Because if I today just take a ticket and go to any part of Africa, I will be treated as a tourist or somebody coming just to visit. So repatriation is an issue which deals with government to government, meaning the governments of CARICOM have to be in dialogue with the governments of the African Union to facilitate reparations and repatriation, you know. The CARICOM government have come up with a 10-point plan for reparatory justice. And the first one is an official apology. Now we may ask, why an official apology? An official apology is vital because offering an apology, it means that you've acknowledged that you've done something wrong and there's need for repairs, there's need for healing, there's need for redress. Today, Britain, for example, and even France, the two people who colonized St. Lucia, because we keep boasting 7 times British, 7 times French. You know, as it's an honor for us. You know, we were 7 times British, 7 times French. Not realizing that it was exploitation by both the British and the French. What took place in St. Lucia. You know? So with the whole need for the settlement in Africa, because to leave the diaspora and to go to Africa, you need transportation, whether it's by air or by sea. You know, so the proceeds of reparations would facilitate those. We need to establish settlements in the countries where we go in. And that is where the government on the African country have to facilitate in terms of providing land, infrastructural development. Because if the little work we've done in the West, we should not be using that to pay ticket, to buy a ticket, and then when we reach Africa, go look to buy land, and to do this and to do that again. No. There are people who can afford it. But in the true sense of reparation and repatriation, it has to be a government-to-government initiative. And that is why we are calling upon the CARICOM governments, because the ALSAP project, we've presented it to the CARICOM Reparations Commission so that they could look at it and see how they could facilitate us. Again, the ALSAP project is not only for Rastafari ones, it is for all who are beneficiaries of reparations, meaning all African descendants. Now, reparations, as I said, there's a 10-point plan. For those who are not interested in repatriation, there are other programs, indigenous cultural programs, debt repayment, psychological repayment, psychological repairs. You know, all of these things are essential to make us whole again, because we were brutalized and beaten down. You know, they considered we were what? 3/5 of a human being. So to regain that 2 other portions, reparation is important. It's a must, so that we could be seen as wholesome people again, in the true sense of the word. As I said earlier on, the Almighty created all of us equal. But colonialism is what made that difference. And that is here what we are here today, to educate the masses, to decolonize our minds. When our countries got independence, one of the main issues of independence supposed to be self-determination, where we're supposed to be able to determine our future for ourselves. But today, a lot of our governments who claim to be independent are still subject to the very same colonizers who colonized us, and depending on them for little grants and so on. Whereas if at the time of independence, our leaders had the opportunity to demand reparations, but they kept silent and they accepted little gifts from the colonizers, which was pittance when it comes to developing a nation. Because remember, you know, the literacy levels in most of those Caribbean countries prior to independence was very high. So the leaders had to go through that process of educating the masses on their own, with very little assistance from the colonizers. You know? So within the whole process of reparation, within the ALSAP, what we are doing is to create a financial institution to manage access to capital for settlers towards business financing. Because as we say, some of us are business people down here and would like to transfer our business over onto the mainland. So there is need for financial institutions, whether it be credit union, banks or whatever, to help those business people who are moving across with their business. So all of these things, the ALSAP project is looking into establishing all of these. The settlement of African diaspora individuals from families within specific nations. Also, it is looking to establish the settlement of both individuals as well as families who have that desire to return. And all of these things call for finance. You know? So, hence the need, the money side of the reparations. It's not money that will go in our pocket or in Daman's pocket where people are asking, boy, how much I get in, how much I get in. We need to come up with ideas, developmental programs. Because even those who do not want to be repatriated, say for example in St. Lucia, people who will be remaining here, there's need for reparations for them also. Our health situation is very critical. St. Lucia is very high in terms of diabetes and hypertension and so on. And all of these sicknesses are the legacies of slavery on the plantation when they overworked our ancestors, never gave them any treatment, any proper rest as such. And the medication which is being recommended for us today, those things were worked on Europeans. So within the European people, they may get up to 80% efficacy of those medications. But when it comes to us, it barely reaches 50%. And the reason for that is because what we went through on the plantation has changed our DNA. You know, so the people in Europe, when you do a test on them, and the people in the diaspora, and you do a test on them, you'll see the big difference between the two. You know, so it's all those issues would like to be addressed in terms of reparation. So the people in St. Lucia, funds can be used where they could carry out research on our own people to come up with the proper medication for them, as against depending on the medication from overseas or wherever. You know, so all of these things reparation addresses. Also, we want to take the opportunity, you know, to let ones and ones know, you know, that in terms of reparation, there is debt repayment. Our countries today are laden with debt. And the debt are to the very same colonizers. The same people who, when they gave us independence, they left us with high levels of illiteracy. Our health situation was in shambles. So we had to find ways and means to treat those people. And by doing that, they had to take loan from those very same colonizers. So debt repayment would help our governments be able to deal with certain crucial issues which are very important. You know, and we won't be worrying about how much debt we have. Sometimes our governments cannot go into no social program because they are so laden with debt. You know, so they need to try and clear off those debt first. So as part of the reparatory justice, those debts, the European countries need to get rid of those debts so that we could get a clean slate to really do what we're supposed to do. To brothers and sisters, again, I give thanks for the opportunity to come here to share with the IDEM our perspective on reparations. As we say, education is the key. And it is our intention within the National Reparations Committee to continue the educational program in spite of the fact that we have not received any budgetary allocation. It is within our hearts, and we will continue to volunteer those services to our people, because we need the people on board to make reparation a success. Give thanks, Rastafari.
Yes, folks, and that was from Bongo Wisely Teparai, the president of the Caribbean Rastafari organization. And my turn, briefly, I promise, at the podium here is to set the stage for our discussion this evening by explaining why a consultation process and what to expect. The background to reparations has been presented. Those of us who still, after 10 years, have not seen what the CARICOM 10-point plan for reparatory justice is, we want to recommend that you check it out on the website of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, or the CARICOM Secretariat, or the National Reparations Committee, or you could simply Google CARICOM 10-point plan for reparatory justice. It is 10 years old, and I can tell you it is presently being subjected to a review to see how much and how best it can be updated. And therefore, that is one of the reasons we want you to pay as much attention as you can to the 10-point reparatory justice plan. Our discussions tonight come against the background, however, of the presentation of what is called the Brattle Report, B-R-A-T-T-L-E. And the Brattle Report was presented in September by an international group of experts in finance, economics, history, etc., to look into the outstanding question of how much is owed by way of reparations. And Wisely and Councillor James have both warned us that reparations is not only about money, it is about development. But development requires money, and the money that we want with reparations is to finance development. And the methodology for that financing, the first methodology, the person with the blueprint on the methodology for calculating reparations was none other than William Arthur Lewis. Sir Arthur Lewis, in the book, his seminal first book entitled Labor in the West Indies, which was written in 1939. It's not long, we can all read it briefly. It's brief, we can all read it, and it's also available online. Labor in the West Indies by W. Arthur Lewis. It's also available on Amazon. And the commissioners who did the Brattle investigation looked at all of the territories that had been touched by slavery in Latin America and the Caribbean and North America. And they came up with a sum of $113 trillion. 113 capital T, trillion, not million or billion. $113 trillion is owed to the Americas which include North, South, and Central America, and the entire Caribbean, and not only CARICOM, but also the non-English speaking Caribbean, because slavery was committed not only by France and Britain, not only by members of the European Union today, but also by many other European nations that are not members of the European Union, as well as by the United States and Canada. And in the case of St. Lucia, while we still mistakenly boast about being sometimes French and sometimes British, and not recognizing that what it adds up to is 14 times colonialism under two different arch-colonial nations, what we have to start understanding alongside that is that France is as indebted to St. Lucia for slavery and native genocide as the British. And we must not let that get away. We must not let that escape us. St. Lucia is one of the several CARICOM countries that were also colonized by France during slavery. And therefore, in making our demands for reparations, it must not only be aimed at the British, we also have to direct our reparations demands to France. And that $113 trillion, we will not tonight be going into how they arrive at that, because there's a figure for St. Lucia, there's a figure for every country, and there's a figure for every colony. And we would like to know how they arrived at those figures. Secondly, we would also want to know what it is that the governments are saying to the Europeans on our behalf. Because for 10 years, the governments have been negotiating with the European Union, and it has appeared to be a dialogue between the deaf and the dumb. Because after 10 years of CARICOM requesting a decent dialogue with Europe on reparations, we still haven't. 14 independent governments of member states of the United Nations, former colonies that are independent, some of which are republic, but 10 years after requesting a meeting with Brussels, the seat of the European Union, have not got a response from Brussels which says this is from the European Union to all of the governments of CARICOM. What we have had over the years are individual responses by individual European countries, some of which are saying we're prepared to talk, some of which saying we ain't talking, some of whom are saying we're sorry but we will not apologize, some of whom are saying we have been helping through all of the aid we are giving you, but none of whom are saying we are ready to apologize and pay up for our reparatory justice. So for the last 10 years, the members of the NRC have been working to take us to the stage where we are tonight. And I'd like to acknowledge, before we go any further, the members of the NRC, both present and absent, because they, us, we have led this entity over 10 years through a process of pure and absolute voluntarism. No pay, no recompense, and we're not in it for the money. We have survived 3 successive administrations. The Kenny Anthony administration that appointed us, the Alan Shastney administration that followed, and the current Philip J. Pierre administration. None of the above in all of the 10 years have seen it necessary to provide us with a budget. But still, we move on. And people are asking, our colleagues in CARICOM, when they recognize the level of activity, like what we are doing today here, which is the first time a national consultation on reparations is happening in CARICOM. It is happening right here in St. Lucia tonight, and every one of us here is making history. And the hundreds or thousands who are following online, you are part of that history, but we would certainly have preferred if we were able to involve you in this discussion. And that is why tonight it is going to be incumbent on those of you here to ask the questions. We will pass the mic around. We will give each presenter 3 minutes for your first presentation, and we will not pass the mic back until we have exhausted others who have indicated they have something to say. And something to say is something to say. It can be a question, it can be a comment. You could want to know a little more about anything relating to reparations, a little more about anything we have done, a little more about what you think we might not have done. This is what we are here for this evening, to help bridge the gap, the communications gap, the education gap, the understanding gap, so that when we leave here this evening, we will have started a process, because this is just the beginning. This is the launch of a national reparations consultation, and it is going to continue. What we're doing tonight is that we offered the possibility for the Castries constituencies represented by the Mayor and Constituencies Council. Castries Central, Castries East, Castries South, Castries Southeast, and Castries North. They are all, tonight is their night. I have no doubt that each constituency will want to have its own separate discussion down the road when they recognize what they have missed tonight, and therefore we can tell you that the plan, when we discuss these issues on the 4th of October, that was when we discussed the battle report as the National Reparations Committee, and tonight, less than 6 weeks later, we have brought us to where we're at. And in 6 weeks, look at where Israel has taken Gaza. But that's another story for another show. So before we pass the mic, I want to acknowledge the presence, as well as to point out to you the members of the National Reparations Committee, and they are as follows: Dame Paulette Louisi, GGE, Monsignor Dr. Patrick Anthony, Ambassador Elmer Jean Isaac, that is our ambassador to OECS and CARICOM, Honorable Dr. June Suma, former ambassador to CARICOM and former Secretary General of the Association of Caribbean States, and who is now one of 2 CARICOM representatives on the Permanent Forum, United Nations Permanent Forum for People with African Descent. She was a founding member, was away for many years, and is now back. Also, Bongo Wisely, whom you have heard more than once this evening, also with us this evening, a member of our committee representing the Ayanola Council for Advancement of Rastafari, Claudia Isis Shepherd, also Raisa Joseph and Ember Charles, the chairman and executive director, respectively, of the Monsignor Dr. Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center, we have Leslie Crane Mitchell, who is the head of the University of the West Indies. I almost said open campus, but it is now the global campus. And with us this evening is Mrs. Leslie Crane Mitchell, the head of that entity here. Also on our committee is Nkrumah Lucien, who is sitting at the head of the table here, and then Nkrumah is a lecturer in history and has been carrying the baton in terms of our focus on an outreach to youth. Also with us here is Emmanuel Alexander, sitting between Nkrumah and Wisely, and he is representing the Archaeological and Historical Society on the committee. Also, we have Yannick Jean-Bart William. She is the president of the National Youth Council, and she too is a member of our committee. And we have Ethan Leand, who is the vice president of the National Students Council and is the new representative to our committee. And we also have Earl Buski as chairperson. And I'd like us to put a round of applause for our members. These have sacrificed for 10 times 365 days, that's 3,650 days consistently that we have put into every day, every week, every month, every year, ensuring that we could have taken reparations from the concept that was presented us to the context and the actual something that you can relate to, which is why we have brought you here this evening. So, all that said, we have come to the point where we pass the mic around, and I said, do not hold back. This is what you are here for this evening. You are representing St. Lucia. You are representing all of the 17 constituencies. You are representing all of the 180,000+ St. Lucians between Grosile, Vieux-Fort, Soufrière, and Micoud. And you are also representing the Caribbean community, CARICOM, of which St. Lucia is one of 14. And you are also representing the St. Lucians at home and abroad following us online this evening, who will certainly be able to follow and to continue the discussion beyond tonight. So thanks again for coming, and this is where we open the floor. We will take the we'll mark you by show of hands. Each person will have 3 minutes, and there can be comments, there can be questions, there can be queries, there can be observations, whatever. We're passing the mic, and we want to hear from you. Who's first? Yes, I'll take the mic to you. Can I walk with it?
Yes, Brother Buski. Good night to the head table. Good night to everybody. My name is Gaspar Henry, and the first thing I want to say is that I want to thank all the soldiers for fighting the fight of faith. You know, it's an honor to see you all going, forward to ensure that we black people are compensated for all the injustices that have been perpetuated against us, So I think it's a very good job that you all are doing. However, I find that one thing leads to another. If there wasn't slavery, then there wouldn't be need for reparations. Amen? But I find that in our 238 square mile country, I find lots of slavery comments are being made against us black people. And these things, these statements are not being condemned. They are not being challenged. And it's like slavery is being imposed upon us again. And we're not standing up and making the people or the persons who make comments against us as black people, we're not standing up against it. And I find we black people, we are too passive. You know, you hear things like slavery had a conscience. And we're just taking it. We hear things like, you know, threats of being flogged. A certain segment of society should be flogged. And when I follow slavery, you know, and I see how black people were being tortured and flogged, and I still hear in these comments, and we just there as black people. And I'm saying to us that we need to challenge these statements. We need to oppose these statements. We need to stand up and fight against these statements. And then we will see our younger black brothers and black sisters falling in line, because they know that they have champions that not just, you know, pushing one segment, but they have champions. So we need to be more militant. We need to be more militant. We need to be more active. You see? Now, my question. It is said by y'all that administrations have been in place and there isn't any support. Have y'all written to this administration in terms of support? Just want to know whether y'all have written, whether y'all have asked, whether any proposals have been sent forward. Just asking that question. Yeah, to the table, whether any attempts were made in trying to ensure that there is something in the budget for y'all. So that's my contribution.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for your comments on the need for us to be more militant, and I think you are reflecting the reality that over the period since independence, and particularly in the last 10 years of the existence of the NRC, a certain level of consciousness has evolved and developed to the extent that you and many like you can take offense to the things that our parents would have stood by and listened to and accepted, like colonialism had a conscience and we should be flogging some people. The fact that you find and you can say here at the Castries City Hall to the world that we are not militant enough. The St. Lucians listening will discuss among us and among those online whether we are militant enough, whether our militancy has to be reflected in what we say and in what we do, how we express that militancy, to what extent, and how we measure our militancy versus the results that we are looking for. On your question, simply, we have been around for 10 years, and one of the requirements every year is that you submit budgetary requests, and that is a requirement on our part as a government-appointed entity. And on the several occasions that we have made such requests, we have not been refused. We just have not received any response. Nonetheless, we have continued to work because, like I said, we're not doing this for the money, but for the cause. And inasmuch as everything that we do has a cost, the secret of our success is in networking, being able to get entities and persons who are committed to the cause to put their heads, their hearts, their hands, and their minds together, their resources, and the infrastructure that we would need to get things done. We ask government committees, intergovernmental committees, fraternal committees, and all of the entities that understand what our purpose is to work with us to make things happen. And that used to be the secret of our success, which is no longer a secret, and we hope that all who are listening and can make use of it can share. Who's next?
Gasper, I would love to think, or within my calculation of things, one of the reasons for that is because the average St. Lucian seemed to think, because of the educational structure, that our history started after 1492. And so therefore, certain things we embrace, had we had knowledge of true African history, we would have known that our very identity, because what you said is an assault on our identity, we would have valued our identity more and know that this is something worth defending. Too often, persons treat, again, it speaks to the fact that we grew up in a society where persons are taught to exist rather than live. They defend nothing and stand for anything. And I think really and truly, as Bongo wisely said, the structure and the nature of our education need to be revisited, and this might have well be a generational challenge, in that we don't expect to see the change now, but we must engage and start now.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor, and take the mic to this lady here for me.
Good evening. You can call me Elle. Just to build a little bit on what Gasper said and Mr. James, yes. The fact that you said, I wanted to first commend the group, for pushing this and for their level of commitment. But one of the things that I wonder, he said that this is a historical event, and because you have been doing this for so long, I wonder, is there a lack of commitment which ties into our own personal acceptance of the egregious wrongs and dehumanization, and it impacts on us, as a people? I mean, we like you said, our education, a lot of our young people don't know anything in terms of not just the knowledge, but the feeling, the internal, understanding and level of defense, if you will. How sustainable is the journey without adequate buy-in and respect for the cause and self-responsibility and accountability for the fight, that we are facing? Because I don't know how, committed. If you're in the fight for so long and today is only just a historical occasion, I'm a little concerned about the level of commitment, maybe not from the immediate members, but as a collective. So that, I think, for me, it's a problem. It's lacking severely. I do have another question, but I'll wait for that one to be. Ask the other one. You sure you don't want to address this?
Thank you. The whole issue of sustainability is one where we have to remember that the struggle for reparations started from the day the first free African was kidnapped and enslaved, and in their minds decided, I want to go back home. I got to be compensated for what is happening to me. Because we can never imagine what it was and what our forebears went through. And that collective pain has continued for centuries. It has resulted in, like Councillor James was saying, and also Bongo wisely, an altering of our genetic being. And therefore we have diseases that other human beings don't have. And they were not naturally built within us, but they developed over a long period of generational eating badly. And therefore, sustainability has to be seen within the context of the long term. This is not a struggle where we set a date to achieve. Reparations is a continuing struggle which, as wisely pointed out in 1834, our forebears were saying no reparations, no emancipation. 50 years after emancipation, when the British had the Royal Commission on Reparations, a St. Lucian from Laclery represented black people the world over, people of African descent. And he was one of the strongest Caribbean members. Back then it was West Indian. He was a West Indian member of the Pan-African Congress. And it was up to him to present the case 50 years after emancipation, before the first Pan-African Congress was held in London in 1900. He was resident in England, and his name was John Quinlan, and you could look him up. He wrote a book called The Earth a Plain. John Quinlan from Laclery was also an astrologer who made a contribution to the debate back then as to whether the world was flat or round. But in his other more important life, he was the one who represented the sons and daughters of the Africans who were enslaved. And back then in 1900, when he made that presentation, which we have access to and will be publishing on our website at the right time, back then there was no idea about how much is owed. And I'm addressing the issue of sustainability here. Because while CARICOM took 12 years after the declaration of slavery as a crime against humanity to launch the CARICOM Reparations Commission, it took 9 years, from 2013 to 2022, to be able to put a committee together to look and see how much we are owed. From 1492, when Columbus opened the way for Europe to come and commit native genocide before introducing slavery and all of the others that led to indentureship, there was no sign, no thought about how much was owed. Back then, Africans were simply asking for repatriation, send us back home. It was not about reparations, it was send us back home. And in 2022, is when we were able to sit down and settle and say, let us look and see how much we are owed. And now we have a figure, $113 trillion owed to the Americas and the Caribbean. Now, the next issue is, how do we get that money? When do we get it? Do we get it? Because in taking the reparations issue to schools, as we have done here, in the period between 2019 and 2020, and when we took reparations to the communities, Mark, Vieux-Fort, Grosley, etc., there was a very strong difference between what we got from the students and what we got from the communities that were affected by slavery in the valleys, in Roseau, Cul-de-Sac, and in the Dennery valleys. The average person in the valleys question after we opened the floor was, when we go get our money? Or will we get that money? And we had to explain that it is not about going to the treasury on the last Friday of every month to collect our grandfather back pay, like Chuck does son. But what we are looking for is reparations for everybody. So we are looking now at the mechanisms of how we are going to share that money. Who is going to qualify? Whether you have to prove in your DNA that you have African blood, whether you have to prove that your parents were direct descendants of Africans, whether we're still going to apply the 3/5 application, where we now feel we are not sufficiently complete and therefore we need reparations to bring that other 2/5 that we were told we are missing. So the issue of sustainability sustainability is a good word to apply to every task that we undertake. But sustainability is a yardstick without measurement. It's a yardstick without measurement, because sustainability, measuring sustainability, you have different strokes for different folks, different measurements for different situations. And if we are to look back on the issue of sustainability, then we, this generation, are the best and the most advanced because all of our forebears did not have even a sight or a thought of reparations and what it would look like. We have 14 CARICOM governments, 14 independent governments, each being a sovereign member of the United Nations, coming together for the first time in history to make demands for reparations on former colonial masters. No other region in the world, Africa, the Americas, Asia, no other region in the world has seen leaders come together to make a common call on the former colonizers for reparations. That is historic. What is also historic is that we are the first generation that can see reparations on the horizon, even though it's a distant horizon, but we can see. We know how much we want. We have a 10-point plan. The first item is requiring an apology. The second is repatriation. We go down the line and we address the economic issues, the social issues, the need for exchanges in science and technology, the need for us to have museums, for us to be able to know from whence we cometh, the need for us to be able to improve our health services, so like the brother was saying, we could do experiments on ourselves to come up with our own medicines rather than importing the medicines that have been developed for bodies other than ours. And all of those elements are within the 10-point plan. And when you take the 10-point plan and you put it alongside Sir Arthur Lewis's Sir Arthur Lewis's book that I mentioned earlier, Labor in the West Indies, and then you take that and you put it alongside those of us who like to read or who prefer to be read to in podcasts and reading books, I just call them. There are two other texts we need to have to get a better understanding of where we are and how far advanced we are Britain's Black Debt by Sir Hilary Beckles, and his latest, which is How Europe Underdeveloped the Caribbean, the West Indies. Walter Rodney wrote How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Sir Hilary Beckles has written How Europe Underdeveloped the West Indies, our Caribbean. And when we put those texts together, we can see and we can be proud of how far advanced we are. And I want to acknowledge the presence of Monsignor Dr. Patrick Anthony, who I introduced earlier as a member of our committee. Welcome, Papa. And I hope I've answered your first question. Number two? On this issue? Yeah. Okay. We have to go back to her.
Yeah, good evening all. Emmanuel Alexander. I also represent the Annular Council. I am the new interim chairperson for the Annular Council. An interesting comment when it comes to sustainability. The reparations movement in the world has been sustained since the day Rastafari called for reparative justice in the world. Since that day. And it's not 1 or 2 years, it's been decades we've been calling. So it is something that is sustained, but we have to measure its sustainability, which is very, very important. Because the United Nations is saying to us, and the countries in the world and the administrators of the world are saying, do not throw the Rastafari contribution under the rug. Do not underestimate the contribution of Rastafari globally. And also they mention and they single out the Caribbean, because these were the persons that have been clamoring for reparative justice long, even before the administrators of the different bigger countries in the world. So now they have grabbed onto it, and they're telling you to not forget Rasta is we. So it is sustainable, but we need to measure its sustainability. And how do we do that? Is by education. Simply because I am also the General Secretary for the St. Lucia Archaeological and Historical Society. 2021, we hosted an exhibition called the Ties Exhibition. And it was simply about where you're from and where you're heading to, where you came from, and what did you do within your journeys. And at that time, it was the COVID era, and that was the only activity for emancipation in 2021. The success of that initiative was simply that the Labour Party had just gotten into power. And then we were graced with the Prime Minister's presence. And we said to him that it is time for us to take our history into the schools. And he accepted it. And that is what we're working on presently, to be able to take out the cloud that have been covering our faces for so long. Because all the histories we learned was not our history. It was the European history. But presently we are bringing our history into the schools, my people. And this is also part of the work that we'll be doing as Justice and the Reparations Committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The responses were twofold. I think you leaned more to what I was alluding to in my question, because this wisely, he touched on the internal reparations and external reparations. So my concern is not on the economic side of reparations, because, you know, if you've made strides, you've made strides. The internal, you know, discussion of reparations and how that affects us as a people and the respect of it, that's what I'm saying in terms of teaching children so that they understand and so that they feel a sense of defense. So it's not just about us talking about reparations from an economic standpoint, but the level of respect and the level of awareness, I think a little bit more time should be spent on that, rather than, again, recognizing that we need the money. When we're going to get the money, how much money we're going to get. Even if you get the money, where is your self-awareness tied with that? And how do you move forward in terms of your own personal sustainability? I wanted to correct that. And my second question is that there's a lot of healing and conviction that, that I guess is required from the continent's perspective to facilitate a move when you talk about repatriation. And I know he mentioned that people can repatriate if they so desired. And from the resources of reparations, then you would be able to do that. My question is, how realistic and economically viable is that idea with the level of internal turmoil and vulnerability inside the continent? How prudent is repatriation with peaceful and a sustainable settlement? Because I don't know, in terms of them understanding or the separation that have happened for so long, how is that, you know, I just would like us to address that a little bit.
Yes, this is an issue that was addressed by Wisely, and it is one that we need to discuss, because as he also pointed out, two important things he pointed out. Not everybody in the Caribbean wants to return physically to Africa, but the idea is that those who want to ought not to be told you cannot. And if we are the sixth region of Africa, as designated by the African Union, if that makes us Africans abroad, continental descendants abroad, then why should we need a passport or a ticket to enter? Why are we treated as citizens of another country when we arrive? And that is one of the fundamental issues that the Rastafari movement is raising, because this is not only for Rastas. The Rastafari brethren who have gone to Shashamili in Ethiopia will tell you that while they have settled and while they are happy there, they are still unhappy about the fact that they are not treated equal as Ethiopians, because they are told, we cannot give you what we do not make available to Ethiopians and Africans born here. So therefore, we have to be able to put into context the fact that the African Union is one body, but it represents 55 nations, each of which has immigration laws, each of which has immigration officers at the point of entry who under law can determine whether they will allow you in or not, irrespective of what case you make about your African ancestry. So it is an issue that we can debate to and fro. I will pass the mic to Wisely, but we need to be able to see that it is not an issue that is going to be solved like putting Andrews in a glass of water for a bellyache.
Yes, give thanks. Yeah, just before I enter the second part, just to go forward on the sustainability aspect. In terms of the sustainability of the reparations campaign, as we say, it started from 1834. Our ancestors were clamoring for repatriation as well as reparations, because they said no reparation, no emancipation. Now, reparation is not an event. It is a process which takes time. As we say, education is very important. And we need to be educated so that we could be able to appreciate the need for reparations. Because as we say, some people just feel, boy, it's a money to come in my pocket and this and that. And no, reparation is a healing process. As we say, it is not something which is confrontational, it is reconciliatory. Now, up to today, most of the perpetrators are still in denial. Cameron, former Prime Minister of England, came to Jamaica recently and said, man, it's time we forget about this reparation and time to move on. You know? So there will be resistance. So it's not an overnight thing. You know, because even I am of the view that the CARICOM heads decide to entertain reparations when they realize the Mau Mau in Kenya did receive reparations from England. Now, the reparations which the Mau Mau received is totally different to the reparations for chattel slavery. It is a much longer process. The Mau Mau situation, you know, the documents are still available. Now a lot of those documents are in British museums, in European museums. We do not have access to those information. Our children do not have access to those information. So hence the reason why some of them are even as well negligent in terms of entertaining reparations. You know, so it will take time, and that is where the education comes in. And also, you know, our governments have a role to play. Because when we thought we were decolonizing ourselves with independence, what we saw happening is that our leaders have made themselves comfortable in a zone where we would call neo-colonialism. So when we feel as though progress is being made, it's like one step forward, two steps backward under neo-colonialism. So we have to derail colonialism totally to be able to realize ourselves as African people and to be able to appreciate the process of reparations. You know, so in terms of the sustainability, today we can see that a lot of strides have been made. As Brother Earl said, a figure now can come on the table and say, well, that is what it's worth. Now again, the reparation have to come in developmental programs. It's not money going in this one pocket. We see reparations in America and those places where people get money individually. But with the chattel slavery issue, it's a totally different scenario. You know, so we can't compare the two. We may see, yes, well, the Jews got reparation, the Mau Mau get reparation, but then for chattel slavery, it will take a much longer period, and that is where resilience and determination on our part is important. And for that to happen, we must totally eradicate colonialism. We need to decolonize our mind so that we could think properly and then move forward as what would say as wholesome people to be able to claim our reparations. The other issue, what was the last issue again, please? I kind of slipped me. Right, the readiness of the continent. Presently, we know colonialism damaged, the same damage which was done to us in the diaspora has been done to Africa as well. But presently, we see that Africa is awakening. The Francophone countries, we can see right now they're standing up for their rights. So that is a campaign which we in the Caribbean need to embrace and follow suit to totally decolonize our system. You know? So there are countries that are willing to receive us as returning citizens. And these are the countries we will be dealing with, first and foremost. There are others who are still, as we say, neo-colonialists. So they will not entertain that kind of a subject. You know, so we have to be strategic in the way we deal with this situation. Yes, there are countries which have already made land allocations available. Tanzania, South Africa, Ethiopia, Ghana. These countries have made land available for those from the West. But then a lot of us from the West, we don't have to pay our own ticket to go over. We should not. Some of us have done it, but we should not. It should be part of the whole package of reparatory justice. You know, so that is why it will appear as though it is dragging, it will take time, but patience is virtue. Because as I said, from 1834, that was the cry of our ancestors, and today we are still here, 2023. Now, we who are presently engaged in that campaign, we may not be the ones to enjoy the benefit of the victory. It may be our children, but we have to make sure that we keep it alive so that they coming could benefit. Give thanks.
Thank you and well said. We go to this brother here with his questions.
Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and also a member of the clergy. What I have to say tonight is that if everybody could just stand up. Well, you will not see it, but if you come here, you will see something at the back there. Just stand up. Above the flag, there is something written in the center at the top there. It says, Castries City Council Incorporate. What does the term incorporate means? To be incorporate, that means to say, it's a business. So, we are here in a business, and we're claiming that to be we are part of the business, but the business does not belong to us. Who does it belong to? The persons who create it, not me and you. All what happened, they use this thing to have us where we are. And when they change it from you being a slave, what they did, they use this incorporation thing and they continue with the same story. And you are still a slave working for pittance, and they're still making money, and the money they make, it finish under them. So what is it that we're fighting for? First of all, I didn't hear, I heard from you, I think this gentleman who was sitting over there, he said that there were genocides of the natives. But all the natives didn't die. Because I am a living proof of part of the native that didn't die. our people continued. And maybe 70 to 80% of the people of St. Lucia have native blood in them. I didn't hear that come out in terms of saying that these people who are natives, who are still here, I didn't hear anything special about them. Like, there were genocides. We repeating the same thing the British said, the same thing the French said, the same thing the Spanish said. We are still here. And we have to be dealt with just like those persons who are saying they want to be going back to Africa because they are descendants of Africans. But even me too, as a descendant of native, I have African blood in me too. One of my great-great-grandfathers was an African. His name was called John Africa. That was the name they gave to them. So he was an African. So I have African blood, I have native blood, and I also have blood of the colonizer too, because he abused everybody that was with him. And he was not there alone, you know. He brought his religions with him. And his religions were the Vatican, who is represented. The other two that were there are not there. The Anglican, the Methodist, all of those things were persons involved in this slave trade business. And there was another religion. The Jewish religion was involved in it as well. It's not only European countries, so all of those persons who partook in the business that they were running, who are still involved in the business that they're running. Where are we now? We are still the same slaves we were then as we are the slaves now. Why do you think, you believe you would see the ex-governor general or the governor general coming here? That is against him, because they are the ones that have to pay it. The incorporation, St. Lucia is not a country, St. Lucia is an incorporation of business. And it is still owned by the British. The British have not dropped that. The only way we can get out of this thing, even though we claim that we would be, how do you call it, a republic. Maybe we call it the People's Republic of St. Lucia. But we are still not there yet. And this gentleman said something. He said some people are saying that you are backing dogs, you are this, you are that. You should be flogged as a black man. So there are persons here who still believe that you should have the whip on your back, even though you're working dead hard. Just if you want to see how many people working hard in St. Lucia, pass by behind Jabati Street on an afternoon around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Look at the big long buses that drop in the workers there and see how beaten those persons are looking when they drop them. These people are half asleep. People working late hours. When they come, they're dead already. Right? That is what we're subjecting our people to. You asking, you saying, why are we sick? We have to be sick. Because you work extra hours, you don't get paid. Sometimes they don't pay you overtime, they don't pay you this, they don't pay you that. We are still living in the same slavery, just to say it's a bit more modernized. So reparations will not take us anywhere out of that. We have to go higher than that stage so that we can survive what is going on.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you, my brother, and that is a very important contribution from a citizen who is very much aware of who he is. And Nkrumah, would you like to? Sorry? Okay. Yeah, I think this is a very important issue, because what the brother has raised here is the fact that as Caribbean people, we have evolved from our first people, the people he's talking about, the native people, our first people, the people Columbus and them met after 1492. When those ships came, they didn't just come by accident, because slavery was not about racism. Slavery was an economic mechanism to make profit. You hear about the so-called Great Triangle, from Britain to Africa to the Caribbean, and the profits going back up. And the whole question about the Middle Passage, you know, which was supposed to have been the one that opened the way. But what we are finding out today, 500 years later, is that last year, 1 week before King Charles took the throne, Pope Francis, the very first Pope who is not a European, the very first Pope from South America, from a country where slavery and native genocide took place. And what he is describing is the fact that that native genocide, and remember, brother, this is a call, not reparations for slavery, but reparations for slavery and native genocide. In fact, if you have to put it in order, it should be reparation for native genocide and slavery, because native genocide is what made the way for slavery. But what was native genocide? It wasn't just Columbus and those people wake up one morning and decide they go in and look for new lands to conquer and new people to civilize. They were dispatched by the church. Okay? There was a doctrine, the doctrine of discovery, that was a papal bull issued by the Pope of the time. And therefore, when the pictures we see of the Santa Maria, the Nina, and the Pinta, when they came, you see those ships with red crosses on their flags. And the red crosses on the flags represented the fact that they came on a mission of God to discover and civilize human beings who had not seen the faith of Christianity. And therefore, over a brief period, as the brother correctly pointed out, they exterminated, mass genocide, but not everybody died. But it was like what's happening in Gaza. The number of indigenous people, the rate at which they were reduced following the arrival of Columbus, and the start of the slave trade. In that period between the arrival of Columbus and the start of the trade, the slave trade, the decimation of civilizations, the Mayas, the Aztecs, those people had civilizations that were older than Europe. In the same way that Europeans went to Africa and discovered civilizations that were older than Europe and copied them and tried to sell them back to us. We talk about Timbuktu. You know, you're from Timbuktu. Where is Timbuktu? Timbuktu is the world's library of history in Africa. Okay? Where history was buried and property was valued on the basis of the amount of books and history that is buried below it. So that aspect of our history, where we were told that our first people were Caribs and Arawaks, cannibals and peace lovers, okay, that was his story coming across as our history, History, his story. Okay? So, the process of reparations, like we said, is not about money and economics. It starts with the decolonization of our mind. Like Bob Marley sang, from wherever it came, until the philosophy that holds one race superior and another inferior has finally come to an end. The war will continue. That is what is happening in Gaza with the new apartheid. We survived the apartheid of colonialism, which made us believe that we were actually less than we are. But you listen to the brother who just spoke. And this is not something he read in a book. This is not something he learned at school. It is something that has developed from his awareness of who he is, who his parents were. How come he had a grandfather named Joe Africa, a grandmother who was half white or had white blood, and another relative who had indigenous blood. That makeup is very existent in St. Lucia. You look at the people from Font-Jean-Libre in Soufrière, and we have to ask ourselves, why is that place called Font-Jean-Libre, the Valley of the Free People? Why is the place we call Masque, Massac, in Ancillary, why is it called that name? Because there are reasons. And in 2019, 2020, just after the COVID issue came in, CARICOM adopted a resolution which the CARICOM Reparations Commission also adopted, and we have adopted, and we have to work with the municipal authorities and the governments here to implement. And that is a renaming project. We have to rename our communities, our streets. Why is Castries called Castries? Who was Castries? Who was the Duke of Castries? Who was the Marquis of Castries? Who was the Baron of Laborie? Who was Jeremy for Jeremy Street? Each and every one of those French names that we have for anywhere in St. Lucia, which are more than English, are named after French racist colonial persons who helped keep us in slavery, because the French were more subtle and slavery lasted longer under them. And that is why St. Lucia, as an independent country, was 7 times French, 7 times British, 14 times colonial, but still, despite the amount of time we spent as British, we are still essentially a French-dominated culture insofar as our country. So our children have to know why Castries is called Castries. And if it was named after somebody who helped implement and enforce French colonialism in St. Lucia during and after slavery, why should our city be named after that person? Jeremy Street, and I'm saying again, folks, we have to do that research so that we can involve the young people, our students today. As I said earlier, when we went to the communities, the older people want to know when we get in the money. The students were telling us at school, how come we never learned that? Where can we find the link? What are the books? You can ask Nkrumah. He teaches history at St. Mary's College. And he was one of our lecturers going out to the students. And he will tell you, it's not that they're not interested, they didn't know. Because whereas we learned history at school as part of the subject, whether part of the curriculum, whether we liked it or not, today, unfortunately, history is an endangered subject, to the extent that the University of the West Indies had to take extraordinary measures to keep history on the curriculum, because students are not choosing history, because history can make them make money. So there was a strong move to remove history from the curriculum at the University of the West Indies, and Sir Hilary Beckles and others had to stand up, and the national reparations committees around CARICOM had to stand up and appeal to the good senses of the governments and the directors of UE to ensure that even though history has become unpopular and is endangered, we have to keep it on the curriculum so that we could at least give those who want to the possibility to learn from whence we cometh. So I want to assure the brother that this is not only a struggle for reparations for slavery. It is a struggle for reparations for slavery and native genocide. And I can tell you, given the ethnic mix in the Caribbean, where we are African, Indian, Guyana, for example, has 5 different ethnic groups. Trinidad has as many. Suriname has about twice that number. And each of them have their own religions. And therefore, the issue of reparations today, as we speak, is one where there is a new element, where the sons and daughters of the victims of indentureship, the Indians who were brought here to keep the wheels of fortune turning for the Europeans on the same estates, doing the same jobs, without the chains around their feet. They too were exploited. They too were brought to lands of milk and honey with lily white fields, with promises that they would be returning home with gold. And it is not correct for us to have a situation where Africans are saying we were exploited more than Indians, and therefore reparations should only be for Africans and there should not be reparations for Indians. I do know that CARICOM has been approached by Prime Minister Modi of India more than 2 or 3 years ago, asking for indentureship to be part of the call for reparations. That is also being picked up by CARICOM governments in countries where the issue of indentureship played a greater role in their history than ours. So that is an issue. But also, there is also the issue that comes up from what the brother was raising. Our first people, the native genocide. We have a price tag for slavery. Where is the price tag for native genocide? The destruction of the civilizations. Where is the price tag? Maybe that happened so early that they were not yet checking money to have a price tag for genocide. But genocide was practiced, native genocide, not only in the Caribbean, Australia, New Zealand, Africa, everywhere the Europeans went, they practiced native genocide. And it is important that, like I said, Pope Francis, the first non-European Pope, the first Latin American who, at the Vatican, has shook the system. The most important thing, as far as we are concerned, that he has done of late was, like I said, in the week before King Charles took the throne, Pope Francis renounced the doctrine of necessity on its 500th anniversary. On its 500th anniversary, Pope Francis renounced the doctrine of necessity, which, like the Monroe Doctrine, justified the decimation, the slaughter and the destruction that was done to fellow human beings in the name of God. And we have to recognize that important element in what Pope Francis has done, because that move was not one that was supported by the European clergy. However, as the first pope from the South, the first pope from Latin America and the Caribbean, the first pope who was non-European, the first pope from a country where indigenous people suffered native genocide, and who grew up understanding what native genocide meant to his forebears, is important to be recognized by us, because the doctrine of necessity, now that it has been renounced, it opens the doors for us to investigate the extent to which that doctrine influenced how we were treated. We are now at 8 o'clock. I would say that we are starting to climb the 30-minute ladder back down, but quite a lot can be said in 30 minutes, and I will pass the mic to Nkrumah. Oh, sorry.
I have a suggestion for what has happened in the past. I believe before the next speaker starts, we should have at least a minute silent. That is what we should have done before anybody started talking. I believe we should do that, because a lot of persons have perished under this thing.
Yes, the intention before you came, we did announce that Monsignor Anthony was going to be doing the opening prayer, and therefore we had the opening blessing done by Bongo Wisely Taparai. And as I said before you arrived, when Monsignor Anthony comes, we'll ask him to bless our discussion, and we could also ask him to lead us through the minute of silence, not only for our forebears who have died, but also for the over 14,000 people who have been killed, men, women, and children in Gaza in 42 days. 14,000 in 42 days. Oh, sorry.
Hi, good evening. Speaking on behalf of the youth, I just want to ask, where and how do we start to educate ourselves on reparations, slavery, etc.? Where can we find the information? Thank you.
Yeah, I really like this question. I'll answer that question first, and there's some stuff I wanted to address as well. So first I'll invite you to follow our page on Facebook. That's St. Lucia National Reparations Committee. Okay, and on that page, if you go into the albums, we do post on the page, so articles, etc. But we have albums in the photo section. If you go in there, you'll see different albums where we actually have the titles and pictures of various books that you can check out. Okay, and I would encourage you, we have books on reparations, but further to that, it is very important, not just for the young people, but everybody, because we must appreciate that over the years, this is not something that we have been engaged with. Our elders, of course, they were among our elders who did inform themselves, but by and large, that was not the case. So our elders too should also go and inform themselves. Find out about slavery, what was the experience like, and we have books on that. Find out about what Africa was like before enslavement, because people are of the impression that coming to the Caribbean was, an upgrade. And of course, we are who we are over here. But we should not be of the impression that slavery made us better than what we were in Africa. Because, of course, we have the impression that Africans were uncivilized, that they were demon worshippers, and these sorts of things. And these are some of the things that reparations involves. How do we repair our conception of the past to guide us on how we engage the present? Okay, so there are books on that. There are a number of other websites, etc. But if you start there, you will be led to others. And if you follow our page, you will see the updates and the articles that we post. Pardon? We are not on Instagram yet, but we're coming there soon. So follow us on Facebook, and we are going to be on Instagram soon. Okay? I just want to touch on something that the chairman mentioned. The name of it was a papal bull. It was it had a Latin name, but it's called a doctrine of discovery. And the notion was that it was okay for people who were Christian to colonize lands that were occupied by non-Christians, okay, and even to subject them to slavery. So that opened the way for the various European countries to feel justified in colonization and enslavement, okay? And it's an important move for the church themselves to repudiate that particular doctrine, because now they can then take a leading stance among them to say, hey, we are no longer avowing this particular doctrine, and therefore we cannot therefore support, the continuance of that. Now, I just want to make a quick, I want to look at our present. We often think of reparations as something, we are looking back at slavery, etc. But we must always remember, everything we deal with in the present is rooted in the past. Okay? And while we have the impression that we have gone past the past, we have to examine, let's look at our society. A while ago we spoke about the impression that we have of Africans. To what extent do we really see the Africans and the African traditions as legitimate? Do we see people who may follow different African religious traditions as being demon worshippers and these kinds of things? The way that we eat, is that the only way we can eat? Is it rooted in our experience through slavery? Are there things we can review? Look at how we deal with language. We have a language that was developed in the Caribbean through the experience of slavery that we know as Creole. Okay? Both our English-based Creole and the French-based Creole, how are those things treated? And the fact that we don't deal with it in a particular way, how does it impact the education of our children and our impressions of ourselves? How about the issue of colorism? We have, intra-racial biases where it comes to, people's complexion, people's hair texture, and these sorts of things. So when we speak of reparation, we're not only talking about building a case, but we're also looking at reflect on our society, okay? Where people access to land in St. Lucia. When we look at the situation of crime, is it just a matter of poor character? Is it a matter of an unequal system? So reparations has a lot of things involved with it. And the more that we examine these things, the richer we can make the cause of reparations. And it will not just be something that the reparations committee will look for a case, but it will be every St. Lucian looking at the society through the eyes of history and looking at how we can actually put it in a more balanced way. Okay? And in terms of guiding how we deal with Europe and the rest of the world as we go forward. Okay? So thanks for that question, and I hope that not only you, but the other members of our audience would like the page, follow it, and engage it. Share your comments, throw your questions at us, and we can continue the discourse.
Yeah. Also, in conjunction with what Nkrumah is saying, reparations. Mongo wisely touch internally, but he's talking about internally within yourself. But what's about reparatory justice internally for I and I in St. Lucia as Rastafari? Because we were marginalized by our own governmental people. We were as Rastafari. So I cannot sit here as the interim chairman of the Annual Council and take that lightly. No. Reparatory justice is supposed to belong to us from our state also. Because they took our ancestors, brought them here. That is one atrocity, But while we were here, they criminalized cannabis on us while we were here, which is part of our sacrament. How do we take that? That is doubly, not one, that is two atrocities against I. And we stated it at the last forum where we had all the National Reparations Committees. We had a forum with CARICOM, with the then gentleman from Jamaica, Dr. Brown, and I asked the question, because you all did that to my ancestors. England is talking about, or that country is talking about reparatory justice. But we now as Rasta, that's double. And then we calling on our own people here, our own government. You know, we need reparative justice through the cannabis regime, the cannabis reform. Because remember, a lot of our Rastafari people, that's what they survived on cannabis and sending the children to school. And now cannabis is decriminalized and it will be legalized. So you're telling I that after you marginalize us in Fort Saint Jacques and in all the Guas area, there's nothing for us coming out of that. We say no. Presently, the Rastafari community has sent in a proposal to the government of St. Lucia on the cannabis reparatory justice. And we are looking forward right now to actually follow up on that proposal. Because I think it's very important for us as Rastafari to have our own schools, land that belong to us. You know, we need our own community. We need to do our own thing. But we're not getting that opportunity. But give thanks for the National Reparations Committee, which we are also part of. So we'll be also clamoring for that. Not only for us, but for the younger generation.
With regards to Africa and its preparedness, there's a lot happening on the continent now as we speak, and I think we all here could acknowledge that most of the continent's leaders were European educated and assumed power to facilitate European exploitation of the continent, and as such they became despots. Currently you have a new brand of Africa First, leaders emerging, and I think it is incumbent on us, if we identify as Africans, and we should identify as Africans, because a lion from Africa born in a zoo in Brazil is still a lion. And so we must. Recently there's a revitalization of the Pan-Africanist movement. It took place, a relaunch of the movement took place in Kenya earlier on this month. And what I think, the individual, I think it was basically spearheaded by two persons, Dr. Lumumba and Julius Malema, whom I think, I would very much hope, is the next president in waiting of South Africa. And they did make mention to reaching out to the Caribbean and blacks in the Caribbean. So I feel it is incumbent on us to keep in touch and not lose track. In as much as we may think that, yes, the Africans of yesterday have a sort of, not the Africans, but rather the administrations of yesterday on the continent perpetrated a resentment of Africans outside of the continent. I think the continent is vastly awakening and is prepared to embrace and recognize that Africans all over the world belong to Africa, and that a strengthened identity, I mean, regardless how powerful or how rich you are as a black man, to a racist white man, you're still a thing. And not until we empower the continent, we will always face resentment throughout the world. China, respect, or the Chinese respect, come from the power, social, economic power of China. Americans, when you hear them, they are the dominant, the American dream. The American dream is actually the most powerful weapon the United States ever will possess. It destroys culture, it destroys economies, it destroys people. And so therefore, we must keep in touch with the continent, and whatever we can do to further the continent's holistic independence, psychologically and otherwise, is a plus for us.
Yes, folks, we're into the final 15 minutes. Is there the rate at which we're growing? If we get one more question, it will take us through the rest of the evening. Is there any other question? If not, what I would like to do is to ask Monsignor Anthony to give us his blessings to our discussions, to share it with us, with our large online audience as well, at home and abroad. I think the questions that have been asked have lent to a discussion that I will summarize after Monsignor gives us the blessing.
Good evening, brethren. My apologies, as I explained to Earl, I had the clashing of events, that's why I couldn't have been there earlier. I would just like to make a few remarks before I lead. We are living in a critical moment of history, and we are in a position where Africans in Africa and the diaspora have an opportunity to redefine global civilization in terms of values. You see, we are witnessing today the bankruptcy of a lot of civilizations. Morality, no morality, spirituality, absence of spirituality. The barbarism that we're witnessing in our world today shows us that somehow the level of humanity and understanding of humanity, which has been imposed upon so many civilizations and upon us, is really empty, very empty. Nothing that a human civilization can really survive on. That is why it is basically a culture of death, destruction, not life. And I think when we go back to the history of Africa and we see the kind of civilizations that existed then, the kind of understanding of what to be a human is all about. And we look at our diaspora, African diaspora civilizations, like the Caribbean and the Americas, the potential for redefining what humanity is all about is a gift that we are in position to be able to give to the world. So I think that we have a special place in the history of human civilization because of what we have gone through, what has happened to us, and what we're witnessing now, and what we within our own heart and our own soul we can see that is not good enough, and that can be better. I think our thinkers have taught us the capacity of our imagination, and the world needs our imagination to show the world that it can be a better place. That it's not about money and power and domination and hypocrisy and death. It's not about that. There is a possibility of dreaming, imagining something better. Our poets, our writers, our artists have shown us that. And I think this is a gift that we can make to the world. So I would say that one of the tasks of the reparation process is in fact to help our present human civilization to discover what it is to be human. It has come out of the inhumanity, out of the womb of the inhumanity, the pain and the suffering of the inhumanity, the barbarism that has been the experience. Out of that can blossom dream of vision that is not good enough. We can do better. We can do better. I think that this is an element that must be added to the reparation process. That it is a challenge we have to help human society to become more human. So from the bottom of the ocean, where our ancestors were buried, out of the womb of the atrocities of indigenous destruction, as it were, can come a voice, the kind of voice that is screaming out in history. As our ancestors jumped over at Sotes, jumped over, saying, no, 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 no. You cannot destroy me. I will not let you destroy me. That voice, that is, almost might call it the spirit of our ancestors. The real human spirit of our ancestors can now propel us today to dream and fight and stand for a new understanding of what it is to be human. Because what passes for humanity today, for civilization today, is bankrupt, it's empty. And we need a new vision. So within that context, I would say, let us stand and celebrate our ancestors' journey. Let us stand and celebrate the no said to what was imposed upon them. Let us stand in solidarity with our own selves and saying no to what passes for humanity today, so that the death of those who have gone before and the dying that has been imposed upon us now, let us say no to it as we're affirming the possibility of a better life, a better humanity. In that sense, we bow our heads and we remember and we commune. And we affirm and we believe and we claim and we saw a new tomorrow, a future that is of our making, on the labor of those who have gone before. Our own efforts now, and our vision for tomorrow. In communal spirit, heart to heart, spirit to spirit, communion of imagination. We dare to dream. Amen.
Brothers and sisters, we dare to dream. And this is where we thank you for joining us for this evening, one of review, one of projection, one of recollection, one of vision. And as Monsignor Dr. Patrick Anthony has just reminded us, the task is to teach the world what humanity is. And it is within each and every one of us to so do it. So as you leave us this evening, going back home, as you get ready to switch off online, we are glad that you have joined us in this communion of minds, spirits, and visions. And we look forward to a continuation of this process island-wide throughout 2024 in all constituencies to ensure that we give all St. Lucians everywhere at home and abroad the possibility of contributing to this important discussion on reparations for slavery and native genocide. We want to thank everybody who contributed to this evening's success, and we wish everybody a safe ride, walk, and return home in whatever way you are. Thank you, and good night.